Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second day of A Language Archipelago, Linguistic Variety and Contact in Cyprus. For those joining us for the first time, yesterday's sessions provided a rich foundation on the linguistic diversities and cultural intricacies that define this island. We had the pleasure of hearing from distinguished speakers on the vitality and sociolinguistic status of Cypriot Greek, the peculiarities and prestige of Cypriot Turkish, and the pressing issues of language attrition and revival within the Maronite community, particularly concerning the vulnerable state of the Cypriot Arabic language, Sana. We also explored the multifaceted linguistic interactions among Cyprus's diverse ethnic and linguistic groups, including the Cypriot Roma, and were introduced to the Para-Romani language, Gurbetcha, with insights into its phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. I would also like to remind everyone that a recording of the conference will be made available and sent to all who have registered, ensuring that the wealth of knowledge shared here is preserved and accessible. So as we delved into today's discussions, I want to express our gratitude for the generous support of our sponsors who made this event possible. With special thanks to the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, the Thesaurus Linguae Graecae, the Nerekatsi Chair of Armenian Studies at UCLA, the UCLA Department of Near Eastern Languages and Cultures, the UCLA Center of World Languages, and the UCLA Promise Armenian Institute. Your commitment greatly enriches our pursuit of understanding the complex web of linguistic exchanges in Cyprus. I'm also honored to mention that our gathering unfolds under the auspices of the Deputy Ministry of Culture of the Republic of Cyprus, the Embassy of the Republic of Cyprus in the United States, and the Honorary Consulate of the Republic of Cyprus in Los Angeles. Your endorsement is a testament to the significance of our collective endeavor, so thank you. With that, I'm pleased to give the floor to Simos Zenios, the Associate Director of the Center, who will introduce today's theme and speakers and will moderate the Q&A session. Thank you, and let's look forward to another day of engaging and enlightening dialogue. Simos.
Thank you, Ioanna, and good morning from Los Angeles to everyone. It's great to have everyone with us. And it's a pleasure to welcome everyone to today's panel as well. So when we were designing the conference, we had conceived the two panels to be integrally connected. We had envisioned that the topics, the questions, and the discussion that each would explore, they will serve jointly to shed light on the rich linguistic tapestry of Cyprus. We already had the opportunity to hear in yesterday's presentations about issues of language contact, perceptions, and ideologies about languages and language policies. The panel today is dedicated specifically to these aspects. We will delve into such subjects like the sociolinguistic attributes of the Armenians of Cyprus and the ways in which Armenian has come in contact with Cypriot Greek. We will learn about cases of language contact between Cypriot Greek and Turkish Greek and about multilingual communities, and we will contemplate the representation of languages in public spaces. We look forward to delve in even more depth about such topics that make language such a vital topic for us all, whether we are scholars who study it or users who are deeply invested in it. Before we begin, and before I introduce our speakers, a quick housekeeping note. We will hear the presentations first, the four presentations, and we will hold a joint Q&A afterwards. So please keep your microphones muted for the duration of the presentations, and you will have ample opportunities to pose questions at the end. At this point, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Professor Matthias Kapler. He's Associate Professor of Linguistics at the University of Venice, Ca' Foscari, and he holds a PhD from the Goethe University, Frankfurt. He previously held the position of Associate Professor of Turkish Linguistics and Literature at the University of Cyprus. He's Editor-in-Chief of the Mediterranean Language Review Journal, and his main research interests are language contacts in Southeast Europe, Asia Minor, and Cyprus, languages and literatures in Cyprus, Turkish texts in Greek letters, the Karamanlidika, Ottoman language and literature in the 18th and 19th centuries, Ottoman poetry, Greek Islamic philology, and the history of Greek Ottoman grammarianism. The title of his talk today is Language Contacts in Cyprus, Linguistic and Social Impacts. Professor Kapler, you have the floor.
Hi from Venice. Thank you, Simos, and thanks to Simos and Ioanna for the organization of this remarkable event. I'm very happy to be here, and I can be here. I apologize, however, for my voice. Sometimes there could be some problem. I have caught a cold, and so I beg for 3 extra minutes, Simos, for coughing. So I will share one moment. So I will begin with poetry, with a poetic line. Many of you, I think, know Vasilis Michailidis, a poet who lived mainly and produced mainly in the second half of the 19th century. And one of his poems at the end of the century, which is called "Ο Ερμής συνομιλεί με της Κύπρου την Βουλή," Hermes talks with the Parliament of Cyprus, is actually a trilingual poetical dialogue between Hermes, he was sent by Zeus, and the Parliament over the heavy taxation on the island of Cyprus. And it's written in 3 languages, Greek, Turkish, and English, in order to ridicule the political establishment of that time. So the intrasentential code switching used in the poem attests to the multilingualism of the author and serves, of course, the stylistic function of satire. So what we see here is Zeus, our father, Yola de Beni, Saftin Tinisho, se se che in your language μαζί σου να μιλήσω. The Turkish part in blue means sent me. So Zeus, our father, sent me on this island to talk in your language with you. And another poem to begin. This is a chatisma from Lurugina. Lurugina is an area north of Larnaca where actually Greek Cypriot speaking Turkish Cypriots live. Elena Ioannidou has worked on that, but today she will talk about another area. And this line is also, as you see, multilingual. Esimbo, no, excuse my Cypriot pronunciation. Esimbo gi elunesun, pendelikten bakardum, mahalenge felonarto mabubangdan korkardum. So where you washed your hair, I looked through the hole. I want to come to your house, to your mahale, but I am afraid of your father. So these are code switching passages from poetry, from bilingual persons. In this case, the Pitaris of this chatisma is bilingual in Cypriot Greek and Cypriot Turkish. This is called code switching, and I have a problem with this. So, and this leads us to what is the conditions of language contact in general. So the conditions, the scenarios of language contact, and the first of all, since languages are not persons who are in contact, but they need to be spoken by speakers, we have to, the first condition is a bilingualism, a certain bilingualism in a certain stage of the language at least, so bilingual or multilingual speakers. What we have also is something we call in social linguistics always, from a social point of view, a so-called dominant and a dominated variety. This is not very lucky expressions perhaps, but that's how it's called. So one of the varieties in the bilingual speech is usually socially dominant or politically, ideologically, and so dominant. The other one is more dominated. This is, however, complex. And we have what we call takeover. So we don't explore only the impact of the dominant language on the dominated variety, but also the variety of the dominated, let's say, speech community, and their variety and the impact of the other. Let me tell you an example. For instance, we do not explore only the, let's say, the Greek elements in Cypriot Arabic, which is the takeover from the dominant to the dominated variety, but we also explore the Greek spoken by Maronites and the impact of Cypriot Arabic on their Greek variety. It's called carryover. So language contact research is a complex thing. And of course, one of the conditions is the so-called degree of contact, which is also a social aspect. And there, at the other part of the slide, you can see the schema, the famous schema by Thomas and Kaufman, where you see on the left side the social degree of contact, casual, moderate, or intense, and on the right side, what are the linguistic results of these degrees of contact. So we have a casual degree of contact with only lexical borrowing. Usually lexical borrowing is the first contact outcome of linguistic outcome of any language contact. Then we have a moderate degree, and we have a lexical and slight structural borrowing. Structural borrowing means that there are also impacts on the grammar of the language involved, not only on the lexicon, not only words go from one language to the other, but also the grammar is affected. And in an intense degree, of course, the structural borrowing is increased. This is called language maintenance, which is the case we deal here. So the languages are maintained, but are in contact to each other. Whereas language shift is also, of course, present in Cyprus, which is another scenario where the language tends to be abandoned by the speakers because of many complex reasons. For instance, we heard about Cypriot Arabic yesterday. And we have also language creation, which is not the case in Cyprus. So the historical periods are also important, but we heard about that also yesterday. Every period now has, I make it a little bit simplified at the beginning, has of course, is the for historical context. And so on the linguistic side, there are official languages. However, these official languages, which are, of course, dominant languages usually, but not the only ones. So we can have dominant languages which are not the official languages. For instance, in Cyprus, we have the Ottoman period with the official language Turkish or Ottoman Turkish. We have the British period with the official language English, but a dominant colloquial language Cypriot Greek. We will see that after, which impact will this have on the other communities. And between 1960 and 1974, we have two official languages with still Cypriot Greek as a dominant colloquial language. This is important to make this difference between dominant languages and official languages. We do not have to confront them. Other languages are involved. We heard yesterday again about Cypriot Arabic, about Gurbetcha. We will hear something today about Western Armenian. But we must not forget also the immigrant languages, which play a role, of course, in every landscape of where languages are in contact. In the case of Cyprus, this is first of all Russian, but also Ukrainian, Tamil, Filipino, other Asian languages. So these are languages which we have to consider in our considerations, in our research also. Let me briefly hint to the social linguistic development after 1974. Because of the dominance of Cypriot Greek, Turkish Cypriots usually before 1974 were bilingual. But this intense contact situation of Cypriot Turkish and Cypriot Greek, and moderately with English, was isolated from these contact languages after 1974. And another aspect, that massive influx of immigrants from Turkey have also had an impact of Turkish Cypriot, the various Turkish varieties spoken in the northern part of the island. We will come to that after again, but we spoke about this also briefly on the occasion of Maria Petru's talk. So let us see the bilingualism situation today of bilingualism. How, as far as Cypriot Turkish and Cypriot Greek is concerned, we can say that there is no bilingualism today anymore. There is in the elder generation of Turkish Cypriots only, but not in the younger generation. And there is not in the Greek Cypriot community, as there has never been, being Cypriot Greek the dominant language in the past periods. We have an Armenian Greek and English also multilingualism. In the elder generation also Turkish, Armenian Greek Turkish. We have, of course, Cypriot Arabic, Cypriot Greek bilingualism, and seldom, rarely Cypriot Turkish. This is a very intense contact, which, as I also said before, and as we heard yesterday, tends towards attrition of Cypriot Arabic and towards language shift. We have the immigrant languages again, with several combinations of bilingualism. The most common being probably Russian Cypriot Russian and Cypriot Greek. And we have some small bilingual communities in Lurugina, in Carpathia. We will hear about that also afterwards, I think. So I will focus on Cypriot Turkish and Cypriot Greek, where I will provide some examples for lexical borrowing between Cypriot Turkish and Cypriot Greek. This, if you remember the schema by Thomas and Kaufman before, this can be subsumed under the moderate degree of contact. And we will have some examples of grammatical borrowing of structural borrowing, which is, as you see, in one direction only, from Cypriot Greek to Cypriot Turkish, mostly, being an intense contact, an intense degree of contact. We will see the between Cypriot Turkish and Cypriot, but we will also take a brief look on other contact languages, especially the varieties, older contact languages like Venetian, English, Arabic, and French. This can be ascribed to a casual contact only. So the lexical borrowing, we have seen many examples yesterday. So I will be very fast in that. There are many examples from Cypriot Greek to Cypriot Turkish. Pandaboulia, Bastiljik, Pastellaki, Asfalia, Mavroyeri, Mogoccino, which with a slightly also different meanings. Of course, a shift of meaning is very common, like in Gotchino is mostly a denomination for a person with red hair and not for the color, for the red color altogether. Also on the other way, of course, we have many words in Cypriot Greek coming from Cypriot Turkish. These are many, very often older borrowing, because the diachronic aspect is also very interesting in language contact. I can only hint to that here. So older borrowings are surely Mokhala, Machalas, Fukaras, Chatirin, and we have, of course, a lot of borrowings in this direction in the food, Burekin, Taramas, and so. You see here that many of the words from Cypriot Turkish to Cypriot Greek are etymologically not Turkish words like Mahale, Fukaras, or which are Arabic words, but they go through Ottoman Turkish into Cypriot Greek. We do have, however, as we heard again yesterday, some Arabic words directly from Arabic to Cypriot Greek, and then from Cypriot Greek to Cypriot Turkish, which is very interesting in terms of migration of words. The famous halloumi, of course. Also some expressions like kulumaka or kulumaka in Cypriot Turkish, basic expressions, I must say, from Arabic kulumak, which means everything with you. And Spiros told us about Baticha yesterday. It's an Egyptian Arabic word, actually, but this is also interesting because there we can see that the Cypriot Turkish Batisha, the form Batisha, phonetically shows us that the word migrates through Cypriot Greek. So it goes from Egyptian Arabic to Cypriot Greek, Baticha. In Cypriot Greek, it has a development with formation into patisha, which means the plant of the watermelon. And this patisha migrates to Cypriot Turkish, where it means again the fruit itself, the watermelon. It's also a basilectal, very basilectal form in Cypriot Turkish. It's not used very often by elder generation, I think. From Italian, it's also the same story. So words are not migrating directly from Italian, for instance, to Cypriot Turkish. They migrate via Cypriot Greek or via standard Greek, as in the case of Piruni. Piron is a word which is not used very much in Cypriot Turkish, but it exists in the speech of elder generation. Fasaria is also a word we know from standard Greek, but Fasaria is not known in standard Turkish. Pandofla, it's the nd in the Cypriot Turkish, shows us that the word goes through the pronunciation of Cypriot Greek. It's not pantofla, but pandofla. So it's the same for Carcola, where we have from Cariola to Carcola, the development of the glide y to the plosive k, which is typical for Cypriot Greek, Cariola, Carcola, Cariola, Carcola. And this develops to Gargola, which shows us, demonstrates very clearly the way how this word goes through the different languages. So this is not a direct passage. English is, we talked about yesterday, we had some words also yesterday, and it's an important contact language, a casual contact degree with only lexical borrowing. We have many examples, especially in the traffic trolley, van, wiper, and we have yesterday also the indicator, and I don't know what else we had from car terminology. The bus, for instance, which in Cypriot Turkish coexists with autobus, the Turkish word, which comes from French. Both of them are used, however, mop, zip, and so on. So now we go to the more interesting part, actually. I hope the time is not, it's running, sorry. I will try to do it very, very quickly. The grammatical borrowing is interesting because it goes deeper into the language contact. So it has to do with moderate to intense contact, which means it must be long-lasting. It has to have favorable social context, bilingualism, a contact like such as family context, trade, commerce, or whatever, which favors also language contact, geographical contact, migration, and mobility. And the most prominent examples are Cypriot Turkish and Cypriot Arabic. Cypriot Arabic, there has been very recently an article by Spyros Armostis and Marilena Kariolemo about this, and I will focus only on Cypriot Turkish now. Very quickly, some examples. The word order, for instance, which is the base of syntax. You may know that Turkish is a subject-object-verb language, so the verb is at the end, whereas Greek is a subject-verb-object language. And but Cypriot Turkish is actually a subject-verb-object language. So the verb is not usually not at the end of the sentence, as it is in standard Turkish. We have here the examples. Another example, which is very interesting, is about bidirectional borrowing. All of you probably know the suffix mish in Cypriot Greek mishimo. In the first example, you have hisieti etemish. In the Cypriot Turkish example, the suffix or the copula mish can express inferential, which means a modality that I have heard of something. I've heard that Hussein is on diet, or someone told me that Hussein is on diet, or it can be also dissociative. So I dissociate. I doubt about that. It's dubitative. So Hussein is on diet, but I don't think so. I don't believe that. So this mish has been borrowed as a lexical borrowing to Cypriot Greek in the form of mishimo, where it becomes a discourse marker. It takes only the dissociative part of the semantics. And so Yorgos Kanedieta mishimo means that Yorgos is on diet, but I don't believe it. And now the interesting thing is that this goes back to Cypriot Turkish, where mish is used only dissociative. So the inferential modality, the inferential function has been given up. It doesn't exist anymore in Cypriot Turkish, and is used only in the dissociative, which comes from Cypriot Greek. So you have the lexical borrowing from Cypriot Turkish to Cypriot Greek. You have the choosing, the selection of a specific semantic function, the dissociative, in Cypriot Greek, and it goes back to Cypriot Greek as a free morpheme with a purely dissociative function. So this is interesting. There are also other, I think, Simos, that I must skip this. Yes. There are other examples of bidirectional copying. I will just close with making clear that language contact, that Cyprus is by no means unique. Hugo Schuhart, who was one of the first scholars to deal with the language contact, especially with creolization, said that there is no completely unmixed language. No extremely unmixed language exists. Or Sarah Thomason, whom I quoted before, with a schema, said that language contact is everywhere. There is no evidence that any languages have developed in total isolation from other languages. So this is a universal thing. However, for instance, in the wider area of Southeastern Europe, this has been studied very, very much, such as the significant work done by Maria Petru of Western Thrace Turkish, or the research of Hasan Kaili and Marian Theogalidou for the Greek-Turkish bilingual community of Rhodes. But still, Cyprus is particular because it's such a small area where such a complex contact situation can be found, can be researched, and so we have to do with a very interesting area indeed here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kabler, for this extremely informative and stimulating presentation. We will now proceed to our second speaker, who is Professor Elena Ioannidou. Professor Ioannidou is a sociolinguist and an ethnographer, and she holds the position of Associate Professor at the Department of Education of the University of Cyprus. Her research interests focus on the concept of a social theory of language, on language variation and multilingualism, on the interrelations of language and identity, and on linguistic ethnography and discourse analysis. Her theoretical grounding lies in the constructs of language as performance and on the interrelations of language choice and language values with larger social groupings, such as linguistic communities and social networks. She has conducted extensive research with linguistically marginalized groups, such as the Romaica speakers in Cyprus, economic immigrants in Cyprus, and inmates in the central prison of Cyprus. She is also committed in social outreach and in bringing academic work closer to communities and communities closer to academia. In the recent years, she has led a number of community-based interventions, such as local festivals and exhibitions, aiming to create alternative spaces for developing collaborations between students, researchers, and community members. Her research projects have been funded by the EU, the Leventis Foundation, the Ministry of Education of Cyprus, and the University of Cyprus. Her talk today is titled Negotiations, Ruptures, and Everyday Alliances in Multilingual Communities in Carpathia, when enemies share the same language. Professor Ioannidou, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Simo and Ioanna, for this wonderful event. I think it's very unique, and we're very honored to be a part of this. Okay, let me share my screen. There. Okay, can you see everyone? Is this okay?
It's okay, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, I think Madias made a very good introduction to my talk. I think it's a very good bridge. So I think it was a good idea putting us after one after the other. I'm going to talk to you about language contact as well, but mostly not so much on the structural level, although I will give you some examples of linguistic exchange. This is an ongoing research that is happening now in the area of Carpathia, which is the peninsula at the northern part of Cyprus, where bilingual and multilingual communities reside and kind of influence each other. So the aim of the presentation, let me I'm trying to minimize the, hang on. Sorry, give me 1 minute because it's our photographs and I cannot. Right, never mind. I'm trying to minimize it. I'll do it like that. Okay. Close, play. Right. So the aim of the presentation is to investigate everyday negotiations and tensions in language contact between two linguistically enclaved communities in the northern part of Cyprus. And bear with me about this because it gets a bit complicated. So basically at the northern part of Gurbetcha, we have Pontic Greek speaking Turkish nationals, what we call epiki, or settlers or Turkish nationals, depending on the ideological stance we take. Many of the settlers of the Turkish nationals who arrived after 1974 are Pontic Greek speaking from the area of Trabzon. So they came to Cyprus speaking Pontic Greek, which they called Rumja, right? At the same time, we have local population, Turkish Cypriots, who were always there and speak all the forms of Cypriot Greek that they call Romaica. So what we have is basically a thriving area where two of the main dialects or two like main dialects of the Greek language, Pontic Greek and Cypriot Greek, are sharing the same space. So just to give you an example, and I will explain more about this. This is a map where Rumja speakers, or Pontic Greek speakers, if we want to be more specific. So Rumja is it's the name they're using for their language. Pontic Greek is how we classify the language. So Rumja speakers came from Trabzon to Gurbetcha, and you can see like on the map, the 4 main villages in the area on the left, in the area of Turkey. And then basically when they arrived in Cyprus to kind of to settle at the northern part of Cyprus, they arrived, they're concentrated in West and East Gurbetcha and some of the villages there. Now, this is a very interesting community. So in the aftermath of the de facto partition of Cyprus in 1974, as I mentioned before, several Pontic Greek speaking communities were relocated from their homeland in Turkey to the Gurbetcha area. Now, you can see the 2 villages, Sürmen and Çaygara, and Pontic Greek in Turkey is still spoken by indigenous Turkish communities in the district of Trabzon. Now, there are no previous research about this community, and in parts of the socio-political context, they constitute a red flag for the Greek Cypriot community because they were transplanted from Turkey as settlers. So even those who are pro-reconciliation, even those Greek Cypriots who are pro-reconciliation, when you talk about settlers, epicus, it's like a red flag. So basically, they're really, really unwanted. And also, there are also similarly ethnographic research among the Turkish Cypriot community revealed that Turkish Cypriots draw a line between themselves and these Turkish nationals. So basically, we have a community who came from Trabzon, they're Pontic Greek speaking, they speak Rumja, and they're unwanted from both sides, right? Just to put it roughly. Now, the other community that is there, we've got Romaica speakers. So these are Turkish Cypriots who always resided in the area or who moved from the Paphos area, from Paphos and from Deliria. If you see like on the left side of the map, the yellow and the red arrow show the areas where Turkish Cypriots who spoke Romaica, who spoke Cypriot Greek as a mother tongue, used to reside. And then you can see their movement after 1974. So they all, most of them moved to Karpasia area. So this linguistic community of Romanian speakers are Turkish Cypriots who have had Cypriot Greek and not Turkish as a home language. And after the de facto partition, many of them had to move from the south to the northern part. Their language use reveals a language shift. So older generations have a Cypriot Greek, a Cypriot Romanian as a mother tongue, but younger generations are shifting away into Turkish. And of course, there's a lot of political load on their use because very often are stigmatized for speaking Greek and not Turkish, right? So just as from this introduction, you can see that the area of Karpasia is an area of crossing, right? So you've got the arrival of Pontic speaking communities in this area from 1976 had added to the linguistic multiplicity of the area because you've got, you know, apart from Cypriot Greek and Turkish, you have Pontic Greek as well. So just to recap, just to have, you know, again, another idea, the communities that are now in Karpasia, you've got local Turkish Cypriots who are Romanian speakers. So they have a very strong presence of Cypriot Greek in their repertoire. You've got Turkish Cypriots who are displaced from the southern part. You also have in Rizokárpathos and Angia Triada enclave Englovismenus, Greek Cypriots who remained in the area. And after 1974, 1976, you've got Pontic Greek speaking nationals who were transferred. And of course, you've got other communities who are economic migrants. And on top of all this, you've got Turkish, which is the dominant language, is the language of the authority, is the language of education. So basically, this is an exciting area where you've got an institutional language, which is Turkish, but you have a very, very strong Greek presence, either in the form of Cypriot Greek or of Pontic Greek, either spoken by Turkish Cypriots or Greek Cypriots who are enclave. And it's a very complicated situation, and that's why it's so exciting. What is also very, very interesting is that these communities are lost from public discourse. No one knows about them, right? In the Greek Cypriot public sphere, the existence of these communities in the northern part of Cyprus is literally unknown. Karpasia is mostly known for the presence of enclave Greek Cypriots, so it's like a flag for τους Englovismenus who refuse to move. In the Turkish Cypriot public sphere, emphasis on Turkish language and the role of school in linguistic uniformity. However, the existence of Greek varieties and Greek is like a form of lingua franca, but is not visible. So in both sides, either in the Turkish Cypriot side, talking about institutions, or in the Greek Cypriot side, these communities are often seen as anomalies to the dominant narrative of one nation, one identity, one ethnic group, one language. And because I'm an ethnographer and I conducted many years of doing fieldwork with these communities and a lot of interviews and a lot of participant observation, what comes out are very, very painful stories of stigma or of immobility and non-belonging. I'm not going to go into the theoretical grounding because of time. I want to share some of the data with you. Just very quick look at what are my theoretical tools. So as I said, as Simos also said at the introduction, I'm a sociolinguist. I'm also an ethnographer. And for ethnography is not just a methodology, but is like a data-driven social theory. So it kind of influences the way we approach communities, the way we understand data, the way we see people and the relationships we develop with them, right? And language contact and variation is seen from the perspective of indexicality. speciality and routinization and borders. So basically, I said I'm not going to go into just a very quick word. So when we talk about indexigality, it's realizing that speakers use variables, like they use languages, or they might use snap of languages, or they might do code switching, as Matthias showed before, not simply to reflect or reassert their particular place, but to make ideological moves. So going into one language or going out of one language means something. Also, the concept of space is very important on language use and formed repertoires. That's why Gurbetcha is a space and as a peninsula where people meet, where you've got political border, where you've got army, where you've got so many different things happening in space is very, very important. And finally, this theoretical construct of borders is also an important understanding of the data, where borders become sites of division, but also of contact. That implicates the way people use language and the way they form their formed repertoires. So for today's presentation, I just want to present some instances of language contact between Turkish Cypriots and Rumja speakers. So I'm going to show you some instances of contact when local Turkish Cypriots who speak Cypriot Greek, so who are Romaica speakers, meet with Turkish settlers, Turkish national who speak Pontic Greek, right? And of course, the question is, what is the role of all these? And again, for today, I just want to show you some examples of ethnographic fieldwork. And I work with people, people that I know very well, people that are not just data for me, but, they've got a life history. I work with them, I learn with them. And this is an example of me going into some of the communities. So these are the names of my participants, and these are some encounters where they were all together. So what is very interesting from some of them of the visits and the data and the observations were that we had Kerem and Ahmet who took me, Turkish Cypriots who took me to visit a family of Turkish nationals of Pontic Greek speakers. So from their narratives of language contact, five themes emerge. And if I have time, I just want to show you a piece of data for each theme. The first theme was that Pontic Greek functioned as a bridge for learning Cypriot Greek for this community. So Turkish settlers used their knowledge of Pontic Greek to learn Cypriot Greek. So they're competent in Cypriot Greek now, right? The second part was that they are also aware. So they developed linguistic reflexivity, linguistic awareness of the differences and similarities between the two varieties. And then number 3 and number 4 are stories of tension. So they had tensions in language contact. They had tensions that revealed deeper issues of identity. And finally, because I'm usually a positive person, I always try to find some air of positive, happening. So these are some. What do these people do to kind of negotiate and find everyday resolutions on their language use? So this is an example of Yasin about the first theme, saying that Pontic Greek was a bridge for him to learn Cypriot Greek. So he's saying, I'm going to read it in Greek. Please note how he's using Cypriot Greek to explain, yeah? Βοήθησε με εκείνον για να μάχω τα κυπριακά. που ήρθα το 1977, ήμουν 19 χρονών που ήρθα, είχαν το χωρκό μου πολλούς χριστιανούς που ήρθαμε εμείς, βοήθησε με βέβαια. Ένας που δεν ήξερε καθόλου, εν τα μανθάνησαν εμέναν. Ήταν τσακισμένη η γλώσσα μας, εμάς. So again, many of the interviews also said that they used their Pontic Greek as a bridge to learn Cypriot Greek. And the fact that they do speak Cypriot Greek now is like an evident, it's an evident evidence to this. What was also very interesting, but also very, very complicated, and I will need half an hour to explain. So I'm just going to show you just some very, very brief snapshots, was that they were aware of the differences between Cypriot Greek and Pontic Greek. And again, Yasin here is giving us an example, saying that the red fonts show the Pontic Greek. Εγανάχτεσα εποστάχικα. This is the Cypriot way, but the very, very basilectal Cypriot Greek of I'm tired. Σκαμλή, αυτοί λαλούν το τσαέρα. He's talking about chair now. Also, you can see in the second part, κουέλες πρόβατα, μαϊρία φαΐ. So here is a list, is a table of some examples for today's presentation, where they were the ones who mentioned the differences of the words. So, for example, I'm tired. They say that in Pontic Greek is eganektesa, but in Cypriot Greek is epostachica. Chair in Pontic Greek is kamni, but in Cypriot Greek it's saera. Ships, provata, guelles. What is so exciting for me is that what his understanding of Cypriot Greek is not the Cypriot Greek that is spoken at the northern part by Greek Cypriots, but these are very old, obsolete basilectal forms that are now not used very much in the Greek Cypriot community. Because they were enclave communities, Cypriot Greek froze in time. So that I found very interesting. That's another paper though. And also they were aware of these linguistic differences. And again, Yaman here says, Ishen glossaman enechatizen, παλιά ελληνικά Yunanistan, καλαμαρίσιμα. So again, he's saying that we had our Pontic Greek were Old Greek, Yunanistan from Greece, and Adam is using the word kalamarissima, which is a way to show them the linguistic variety that is used in Greek, mostly Standard Greek. And of course, there were many stories of language contact and with tensions. Here, it's a very, very complicated example. I will try to explain to you. Basically, there was a big misunderstanding about the phrase pospais. So in Cypriot Greek, when you say pospais, it means how are you doing, right? But in Pontic Greek, or they didn't understand it, and they misunderstood it as you have to leave, you have to go. So he's saying here, Yaman, 76-77 που ήρθα τα πάνω, you can read the English translation. Ήσεν ένας, επέχανε τώρα, λαλεί με πώς πάεις. Πάω λαλό του, τώρα ήρθα. Έκαναμε φασαρία, επί αστυνομία. Λαλό του, εχθές ήρθα στον τζιρί μου, ο τζιρής μου ήταν δα μέσα, πού να πάω. Λαλεί με πώς πάεις, πού να πάω, δα μέσα στον τζιρί μου που ήρθα. Λαλεί, ρε, μου είπες έτσι σου, αλλά άλλα εκαταλάεψες. Τσίνος άλλα εκαταλάεψεν. Λαλεί, είπεν, τι κάμνεις. Λαλεί του, τούτοι τραπεζούντα έτσι γλώτσα, έτσι καταλαένουν. Λαλεί, άιστον, λαλεί. Δεν έχω παραπονόν, ύστερα πάμε παρέα, καρτάσεις, παίρναμε χωράφια του. Είχε γλώσσα, μα είναι τσάτιζεν. So again, this is a very deep, a very complicated and multi-layered example of showing that, you know, a linguistic misunderstanding reflected deeper issues of tensions in the space and in the border. And I don't have time to read this example, but again, this is a bit a more serious example of wider tensions. And also, you know, all that reflected tensions in identity. As I said, the Pontic Greek, the Turkish settlers were not welcomed, of course, by the Greek Cypriots, but they were also not very well welcomed by Turkish Cypriots as well. So here, Yaman, who is Pontic speaker, has a dialogue with Kerem and Ahmed, who are Turkish Cypriots. And he's kind of complaining about about calling him Mavroyeni, black beard, which is an adjective that Turkish Cypriots are used in a negative way for Turkish nationals. So he's saying, Pao Chahame, Pupais ime Kipriago. So he's saying that when I go to Turkey, I'm Cypriot. Dame purkume ime Mavroyenis. Here, I am Blackbeard. And then Ahmed, who is Turkish Cypriots, he's saying, Karashakal pulalume. And I'm asking, ποιος σε λαλεί Μαυρογέννη? Μαυρογέννη, οι Κυπραίοι πουλαλούντο. And he's showing the Turkish Cypriots. And I'm asking, εσένα σου αρέσκει να σε λαλούν έτσι? Και κόφτει με τώρα. And Joko Mavroyeni, he's like, well, like gray now. So again, they found a way of you know, making humor with all this. And again, he's saying that when I asked him about where he belongs, he says, I asked him, αρέσκει σου πω στην τραπεζούντα νηποδά? He said, κόρη μου, 45 χρόνια που ήρθα, δάχαμε 20 χρονών. Έμενα 15 χρονών, 45 χρόνια. Τώρα από εκεί αρέσει μου η τραπεζούντα. Εμένα αρέσει μου ποδά. Τα μωρά μου δάχαμε. Δεν με έμαθα. Ο χρόνος μου δάχαμε πέρασε. Πού να πάω? Τα παραπάνω χρόνια, θέλει να πει. This is the Turkish Cypriot explaining. Τι θα κάνω? And I'll skip that. So, because I'm looking at time. So, okay, so when you try to make sense of these complexities, you know, they're very, very complicated and many tensions on different levels. So these two communities find themselves in the midst of larger socio-political forces, influencing their language choice, language shift, and their form repertoires. The newly formed space and the shifting boundaries create context of crossing, renegotiation, and dialogue. And this strong political institutional rhetoric of one language, one border, one identity discourses, and their everyday life and micro-communication. So we can see language use as a point of dynamic convergence between institutional hierarchy and the individualized, familiar, habitual. So as far as the Rumja speakers are concerned, are on many levels marginalized and not welcomed by different social actors for various reasons. They use their language as a means to claim space and in an area that can be seen as an area of pain, loss, and multiple refugees. Two main dialects of the Greek language, Pontic Greek and Cypriot Greek, meet in an area where Turkish is the dominant language. And speakers, we saw some examples where speakers readapt and expand the repertoire to adapt to the new space. We've got examples of dynamic expansion of repertoires in a very sensitive political area where the communities were divided, de facto moved and transplanted. This community of speakers have a lot to exhibit in terms of multilingual and multidialectal practices. Although in many aspects, Turkish nationals are, let me just, are seen in a negative way for the local Greek and Turkish Cypriots. In terms of language, Pontic Greek is crossed with Cypriot Greek to create linguistic convergence. So what matters in the end is not a pure historical continuity, especially for a sociolinguist and for an ethnographer, maybe not for a politician, but what matters in the end is not a pure historical continuity, but what speakers do with languages.
Thank you, Elena. This was a truly wonderful presentation. And I believe that for many of us, it introduced us to completely new and unknown topics. We deeply appreciate it. I will now proceed to the third presentation. Unfortunately, the speaker of that presentation, Dr. Chriso Hadjidimitriou, is unable to join us due to pressing last-minute personal matters, but she has kindly shared a recording of the presentation, which I will screen for everyone. And for those of you who would like to engage in conversation with Dr. Hadjidimitriou, please send us your questions either via email or in the chat, and we will pass them on to the speaker and bring you in contact with them. A few words about the speaker before we hear the presentation. Dr. Hadjidimitriou is a research analyst at RWS, and she received her PhD in linguistics and her master's in sociolinguistics from the University of Essex. She also has a bachelor's degree in English language and literature from the University of Cyprus. She has held various academic positions in institutions across Europe, such as the University of Leicester, Stockholm University, the University of Essex, the University of Bangor, the University of Cyprus, and the University of East Anglia. She has also worked in the private sector, RWS, and Cyprus Says, which is a language learning app for preserving Cypriot Greek for the next generation. Her main research interests are in the areas of language and diversity, minorities and language rights, sociolinguistics, language contact, multilingualism, language variation and change. I will now screen the presentation, which is titled The Armenians of Cyprus, a socio-historical and linguistic overview. And I recommend that you have your audio at full capacity, because the recording might be at a bit of a low volume, but I'm sure that if you put it at high volume, you will be able to listen.
So I will begin by talking briefly about the community, and then I'll talk about the importance of the Armenian language in the formation of the Armenian ethnic identity in Cyprus. We'll look at some examples as well of Armenian in contact with Cypriot Greek, and then we'll look at, if you like, the reverse, not necessarily the reverse influence, but we will look at how Armenians use Cypriot Greek. So these are the main themes that this presentation will cover. So I'll begin with some information about the Armenian community in Cyprus. The Armenians have a long history of presence on the island. The informants, ancestors of the people I've interviewed for my work mostly arrived in the early 1920s, and that was a time they were fleeing the Armenian genocide in the Ottoman Empire. At that time, Armenians already lived on the island in Cyprus, and they were called native, or degatsi. This was according to Paul Patty. The Armenians who arrived as refugees, then they were called, categorized as refugees. According to Paul Paddy, the Armenian genocide of the late 19th and 20th century had a major impact in the history of the Armenians, but also particular impact in the Armenians who arrived in Cyprus as refugees escaping the genocide in the Ottoman Empire. These events and the suffering that is a part of the history of the Armenian community of Cyprus remains as one of the events that have shaped the community. Following the escape from the Ottoman Empire, the Armenians on the island established their community through schools in different cities that primarily focused on teaching the Armenian language to the younger generations. The desire to teach and learn the Armenian language was a result of the lack of freedom to use Armenian in the Ottoman Empire. So elementary schools were built across different cities in Cyprus. In Lefkosia, for example, this was built in 1921, in Larnaca in 1924, in Limassol in 1951. A secondary school was also built in 1924 in Lefkosia. That was the Melkonian Educational Institute, but this closed down in 2005. So the Melkonian Educational Institute was initially an orphanage for all those Armenian children who lost their parents during the Armenian genocide, but it also welcomed children who sought secondary education in Armenian. Along with the establishment of these schools came the organization of social and cultural clubs and newspapers. As I said, the Armenians can be found across different cities in Cyprus, primarily in Lefkosia. That's the largest community, with Larnaca being the second largest, Lemessos, and so on and so forth. So the community spread around the entire island. The Armenian language plays an important role in the formation of ethnic identity within the community. The Armenian language has successfully has managed to maintain, to show evidence of language maintenance within the community, meaning that the Armenians are passing on the language to the younger generations. It plays an essential role in the formation, maintenance, and survival of the Armenian ethnic identity. So the main factor leading to the maintenance of the Armenian language, is this strong association that exists between the language and the Armenian ethnic identity. So the belief that to be Armenian, one must speak Armenian. In my interactions with Armenian speakers as well, they said that Armenian is used to enact that ethnic identity. We see that Armenian is also used in religion, but that is not as vital as the role of the Armenian language plays in the formation, maintenance, and survival of Armenian ethnicity. Religion obviously varies within the Armenian community and does not therefore seem to reinforce language maintenance in the same way that the association of the Armenian language with the Armenian identity does. As the majority, though, of the Armenians belong to the Gregorian Orthodox Christian Church, where Armenian is employed in religious services, the importance of religion cannot be entirely ignored. It's also important to mention that during the earlier history of the Armenian community in Cyprus, we observed a successful shift from Turkish to Armenian at an extremely fast pace. So the Armenian refugees who arrived on the island were primarily using Turkish rather than Armenian, as they were not allowed to use Armenian in the Ottoman Empire. So this shift from Turkish to Armenian meant that the Armenians were able to revitalize their language as far as this was necessary. As I said before, they succeeded in developing schools, associations, newspapers to maintain and also promote Armenian language and identity. They've managed to resist as much as they could linguistic assimilation. Obviously, as the years pass, this is becoming more and more challenging. The existence of Armenian primary school has been vital. Unsurprisingly, Armenian children who attend the Armenian elementary schools are more likely to be more competent in Armenian and less competent in Greek, depending obviously of their personal circumstances. But the fact that the children are in an environment where Armenian is primarily used, that helps with the use and maintenance of the language. So children attending the Armenian elementary schools are able to interact in Armenian with other young Armenians. So securing up to a point, and for the present, the maintenance of the language. Obviously, the Armenian language has been in contact with Cypriot Greek for quite some time now. And what I'll do is go through a few examples where we can see that influence from Cypriot Greek into the Armenian language. Before I go into the examples, I think it's important to mention that, for instance, for the average Armenian, they would distinguish between two dialects in Armenian, so Eastern Armenian and Western Armenian. And these two dialects are often referred to as standard Eastern Armenian and standard Western Armenian. So standard Eastern Armenian is, for instance, the official language of Armenia and of the Armenian communities in Iran and Georgia. And the speakers of standard Western Armenian are descendants of the Armenians who lived in the Ottoman Empire. The two varieties differ phonologically and syntactically. And when we think of the speakers of Western Armenian, for example, these speakers tend to be bilingual in Western Armenian, plus the language that is spoken in the communities in the countries where they live. So in Cyprus, that would be Greek. In France, for instance, that would be French. So Armenian is spoken in Cyprus, has not been studied with the objective of examining whether Cypriot Greek structures have been imported into Armenian. Paul Patty, for example, does claim that Cypriot Armenian has acquired some features from Cypriot Greek, but she talks about mainly phrases and lexical items, but she does not provide any details. The data that I will show you now, the few examples I will show you now, is some of the examples that have been given to me by Armenians themselves, what they call translations by the speakers themselves. So we'll look at some examples of semantic borrowing, or if you like, what the Armenians call word-for-word translations from Cypriot Greek into Armenian. We'll also look how these have been rendered into a standard should have been rendered, if you like, in standard Western Armenian, to see the difference and how Cypriot Armenian deviates from the standard Western Armenian patterns. The other type of change that we're going to have a look at is change in word order, and apart from, if you like, vocabulary borrowing that we see quite frequently in situations where two languages are in contact, word order is among the next easiest thing to borrow. So let's have a look at the first example, which means I didn't recognize you. The Cypriot Armenian, which is the first example, shows that in Cypriot Armenian you would use a verb that is, if you like, a borrowing, a translation from a semantic translation from Cypriot Greek, whereas in standard Western Armenian you would have a verb that would means recognize. So I didn't recognize you, whereas in Cypriot Armenian the literal translation is I didn't understand you. Again, this is an expression in Greek. If you want to refer to something that is extremely expensive, you say that it will cut your head off. Basically, it's that expensive, and this is entirely translated into Cypriot Armenian to mean the same thing, where in Standard Western Armenian this is expressed slightly different. If we look at word order, we can see here as well that in Cypriot Armenian and Cypriot Greek, the word order is similar for someone took exams. So the expression, the sentence begins with the verb and then the object, whereas we don't see that in Standard Western Armenian. Similar here, we have the verb appearing first following the Cypriot Greek structure, and similar in Cypriot Armenian, whereas in Standard Western Armenian the sentence has the reverse order. So these are just some examples where we can see that the prolonged contact between Cypriot Armenian or between Armenian and Cypriot Greek has had an impact on Cypriot Armenian. What I will move on next is to talk briefly about a slightly different, if you like, outcome of this contact between the two languages, where we are going to look at one example of how the Armenians use a particular feature of Cypriot Greek. So we know that there is evidence that the first generation born in Cyprus, and that is the generation following the arrival of the first group of Armenian refugees in the early 20th century, have acquired Cypriot Greek, but to various levels. So in some cases, we observe some, if you like, deviations, or some examples where the Armenians face some challenges in terms of acquiring Cypriot Greek. One of these is, for instance, the use of grammatical gender in Cypriot Greek, or the use of the definite article that deviates from how the Greek Cypriots would use these features of the language. So in this final section, I will look at some patterns of usage, but in relation to a rather prominent characteristic of the Cypriot Greek variety, which is the use of the dialectal non-standard variant ch, with k being the standard variant. So for instance, for the word end, you can have the non-standard dialectal variant, or je, as opposed to the standard being ge for the word meaning end. Sound, or what we call a variable k in the Cypriot Greek of the Armenians of Cyprus. This is what I will be talking about in relation to language use. So we know that variable k in Cypriot Greek has two variants, as already explained. In Standard Greek, a k becomes k in front of these particular vowels, a and e. But in Cyprus, speakers would alternate between the standard variant and the non-standard variant, as I said, ge and je. The focus of this particular alternation is due to the fact that the palatal velar variant is considered a prominent feature of the Cypriot Greek variety. So ch is considered a very prominent feature of Cypriot Greek. Cyplago et al. Call this a trademark of the Cypriot accent. So we're looking at, what we're going to look at is some data and see whether, for instance, the Armenians of Cyprus follow similar patterns of use in relation to this trademark of the Cypriot accent, or whether they're behaving in a slightly different way in relation to the Greek Cypriots. So for the purpose of looking at this particular sound, I'm using conversational data with recordings with Armenians. So in total, 30 Armenians were recorded in primarily 2 cities, in Larnaca and Lefkosia. By looking at these conversational data, the purpose was to understand how the Armenians are using or alternating between these two sounds, a standard and the non-standard sound, and look at what Greek Cypriots are doing as well, just to understand whether they have similar patterns. So as I said, the informants were divided into 2 categories. So the ones who were born in Cyprus, Cypriot born and raised, and the ones who were not born in Cyprus, who arrived later, after the age of 9, for example. From the 13 informants, I looked at 2,945 tokens to analyze their patterns of behavior, and the combined results from both groups show a tendency to use the standard variant more frequently than non-standard. So what we see is that overall in both groups, the Armenians of Cyprus tend to use the standard variant a lot more frequently than the non-standard. So there is, in general, a preference for the use of the standard variant of using, let's say, ke more frequently than che in higher frequencies than those reported in a study that focused on Cypriot Greek only, which was done by Cypriot et al. 2016. Cypriot et al. Also looked at the combination of variables. They looked at the sex and level of education of their informants. If we look at the data from the Armenians, the Cypriot Armenian male and female informants show a preference for the standard variant as well. They also, which is also not in line with entirely with some of the results from the Greek Cypriots from the Archipelago 2016 study. There was no significant difference between the male and the female informants regarding both variants. So they seem to, if you like, behave similarly in using the standard variant. The Armenians across all different groupings, for example, the Cypriot Armenians and the non-Cypriot Armenians, the male and female Armenians, the different age groups, Armenians living in Lefkosia or in Larnaca, they always show the preference for the standard variant overall. So they seem to be over-applying, if you like, standardization. They seem to be overusing the standard variant a lot more frequently than the Greek Cypriots, which is the Greek Cypriot dominant speakers. So this is, if you like, another example, an insight of how the Armenians have not only established themselves as a community on the island, but also how linguistically they have adjusted in this language contact environment. As I said at the early beginning, the Armenian community is a community that has a very long history on the island, a community that is very well respected on the island, and that is part of the history of the island, and part of the culture of the island in general. I'm just finishing with an image, a photograph from the Armenian Genocide Memorial in Larnaca, which tries to commemorate and remember all those first refugees who arrived in Larnaca escaping the Armenian genocide. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please do let me know. My email address is at the beginning of my slides. Thank you for listening.
We are very thankful to Dr. Hagi Dimitriou for the engaging and informative presentation that she prepared and sent to us under not ideal circumstances. And again, for those of you who have questions or comments, you heard from the presentation that you can address them directly via email, or if you prefer, you can write them via chat and we will pass them on. We will conclude today's presentations with our fourth speaker, Professor Dimitra Karou-Lavriki. Professor Karou-Lavriki holds the position of Associate Professor of Linguistics at the European University of Cyprus. She's the coordinator of the bachelor's and master's degrees in English Studies and of the school Erasmus academic program. Her research focuses on language policy and language planning in Cyprus. It covers topics such as language policy and planning in the government and education, government translation interpretation, linguistic landscape, English as a medium of instruction in higher education, and English as a second or foreign language for young learners. She's a founding member of the Cyprus Linguistic Society and the secretary of the Cyprus Permanent Committee for the standardization of geographical names of the Ministry of Education, Sport and Youth of the Republic of Cyprus. Her talk today is titled Linguistic Landscape, the Visibility of Languages in the Three Main Streets of the Old City of Lefkosia, Cyprus. Professor Karou-Lavriki, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Zenios. I would like to thank you all for being here. This is the last presentation, and thank you for your patience. Before I continue, just a correction, Dr. Zenios, I am not anymore the coordinator of the bachelor's and the master's degree at the university. I was for many years. So we are now going to travel. Let me minimize my picture. Okay. We're now going to travel to Nicosia, to the old city, which is a walled city. It's surrounded by the Venetian walls. Let me see how we change the slides here. Okay. And we will see the linguistic landscape in this, in three main streets of this old city. Now, what is the linguistic landscape? Any written sign found outside private homes, from some road signs, notices on shop windows, public signs, school signs, these form the linguistic landscape, which is usually related to cultural, social, political, and economic circumstances of the area. The linguistic landscape focuses on the visibility and salience of languages on the public and commercial signs. And we usually see the relationship between the language policy of the country or the area in relation to the linguistic landscape. One way to approach the study of linguistic landscape is to study the frequency of a language on signs, how often it appears, the dominance, how dominant it is in relationship to other languages that are also on the signs, and whether it is an autonomous language on the signs. It means whether it can stand alone without being followed by other languages. There are three types of possibilities that show the arrangement of languages on signs. One shows the preferred code, the preferred language first, and the other languages follow if we have an arrangement, a vertical arrangement. If we have a horizontal arrangement, then the preferred code is on the left. And in case there is another possibility, the preferred code can be in the center and the other languages are placed around. Before we move on to linguistic landscape, we have to mention the role of English. Today, English is a language of globalization, and there has been an increased Anglicization of public signs all over the world. English is widely present not only in countries where English is official or co-official, but it is there in countries where English is a foreign language, irrespective of immigration or the presence of English speakers. It has to do with the flows of tourists, and it has to do, this dominance of English has to do with the status of the language in the eyes of the locals. Now, these are the main the pictures of the three streets, Lydras, Onasagoru, and Trikoupi in the old city of Nicosia, Lefkosia. These streets have economic and social significance because they are entertainment areas and shopping areas, but they also have a political significance because the streets end at the divide. There is a dead end. The streets lead to a dead end. Lydra Street has also the crossing point to and from the occupied areas. A very good research on the two sides of the buffer zone has been carried out by Christiana Themistokleous, who saw the linguistic landscape on both sides and how the languages, bilingual signs promoted peace on the island. My presentation has to do with the site in the Republic of Cyprus, not the occupied area. So we will see the visibility of languages, language dominance, the frequency of languages. We will see whether there is an emphasis on either pragmatism or symbolism in the use of languages, whether this linguistic chaos, which shows disorder and instability, which indeed the linguistic landscape is an unstable landscape. There may be some signs which are there for decades, but there are signs that change all the time. So this is a heterogeneous whole, one whole. Is this an expression of the right to freedom of speech? So the research methodology deals with field work. More than 1,451 linguistic items have been collected from these three streets. They show, these are pictures of commercial signs, street signs, road signs, shop and offices signs, building names, etc., not graffiti. And these signs have been placed into 11 categories. For those who do not know Lefkosia, you can see this circle. These are the Venetian walls built in the 16th century. Inside the walls is the old city, which is now divided because the north belongs to the occupied area. But there is a crossing, as I said, since 2000, a bit after 2003, if I remember well, yes. Now, before I move to Cyprus, I want to mention the case of Quebec in Canada. In the 1970s, the government of Quebec promoted language policy, which aimed at the Francization of Quebec. the policy aimed to protect the ethnocultural French-Canadian identity of Quebec, and they aimed at making French dominant and limiting the use of English. So French became mandatory on public signs, shop signs, commercial signs, and if another language had to be on the sign, this language could not be in bigger characters. It had to be either same size or smaller size and not dominant in any way. And this is the result you see in the picture. Poisson en conserve is translated canned fish, but you see the difference in the fonts. We have bigger fonts for French, bold in bold, and the English follows French. So this is the way they safeguarded the dominance of French, one of the ways. So based on this, one MP in Cyprus, Irena Katseli, in the 90s, and was inspired by this change and wanted to suggest something similar. So she submitted 2 bills, which aimed at the obligatory use of the 2 official languages, or one of the 2 official languages, on the names of products, shops, business, companies, etc. And if there are other languages than the official, then they should follow the inscription in the official language, like in Quebec, and should have characters of equal or smaller size. So the aim was to impose a top-down language policy to regulate the languages utilized in public spaces, to decrease the dominance of English, and to enhance the visibility of Greek. And I say Greek and not Turkish, because at the time, there was no way to cross to the other side. The Turkish Cypriots could not come to our side. So there was actually no reason to promote Turkish at the time. In addition, at the time, that time was a Hellenocentric period. It means that it was a period when decisions favoring Greek were taken, like the Greek in the obligatory use of Greek in the court laws, in the law courts, the obligatory use of Greek in the civil service, and on the official documents. So that was a very good period for the bills to be enacted into a law. The parliamentary debate that followed divided the speakers, the MPs, and the people who were invited to express their opinion between the 2 sides. The ones who saw the bills, they saw a symbolic perspective on the bills, and the other ones, the others who saw a pragmatic perspective in these bills. So people who saw Greek as a symbol of their identity were in favor of the bills to be promoted into laws. They said that the Greek will have positive effects on tourism and trade. It will secure the human and constitutional rights of the Greek Cypriots. The government did have the right, for them, did have the right to regulate the languages on public commercial signs. They also promoted Greek as a language of high value. The others were the others who were against the enactment of the law believed that this was a violation of the constitutional rights. It would have negative effects on the economy, that the liberalization of economy did not allow the government to enforce linguistic restrictions. And they said the market itself determines the languages to be used on the signs. Just to tell you that the ones who adopted the pragmatic stand were for example, the Chartered Accountants Association, the ice cream manufacturers, believe it or not, because the production of ice cream is very important in Cyprus during the summer and throughout the year. Whereas the people who are in favor of these bills to be enacted into laws, where the Cyprus Language Association, the Cyprus secondary school teachers, etc., just to give you some examples. Then the legal opinion of the Attorney General was sought, and he said that the bills violate the provisions of the Constitution and they violate the right of freedom of speech and expression. Similarly, the Register of Companies was against, because the registered marks, the registered trademarks, as he said, could not be translated or change in color, font size, font type, etc. So we had to have the foreign language commercial signs when it had to do with the registered trademarks. The result was what we see now. We have the signs which are in English only. It means they are not followed by Greek, like these ones here. The name Theophanidis, you see the PH, which is characteristic of English. This is how we spell if we want to make our surname appear English. Wherever there is F, we spell it with PH, and the end is DES, okay? This is not the Latinized form, the Latinized transliteration. Again, English only signs, notes on the shop windows, menus only in English, Greek only signs, as you can see here, and shop names and notices on shop windows. Again, the same, names of buildings. We have also Greek words which are not spelled in Greek, but they are spelled in Latin letters, like karamellotopos. We don't have the Greek version, which means topos means area, and karamellotopos means the area, the place where you can buy candies. We have Greek names which are transcribed into Latin letters without being in Greek at all. So we see Papa Filippo ice cream followed by English, Latin, transliterated into Latin and then followed by English. As you can see, the F here is with F and not PH. This is the Latin characters. Here we have bilingual signs, Elenios stoa in Latin characters, no translation, stoa remains as it is. And we have also signs which show translation, equal number of words, font size is the same, but we have a minor dominance of Greek because Greek is before English in both cases. We have translation cases where Greek is dominant, clearly dominant. As you can see on the right, we have the tahini pies which appear, which follow the Greek word. They are not in bold and they are not in capital letters. I mean, clear dominance of Greek here. And on the left, again, dominance of Greek, more messages in Greek, and the English is limited. Here we have Greek-English translation, but English is dominant clearly. Closed here is is above Greek and bigger in letters. And crystallized cubes, you can see that they are in the center, much bigger fonts. And then we have the English use for registered trademarks of international companies. As I said, that unavoidably they should be in English. There is no way to modify this, to write underneath the Greek version or how we pronounce, etc. This is not allowed. And then we have signs showing code switching. I mean that we have on the left, Xenopoulos in Greek, the name of the shoe shopper, then in English, Spanish, and Italian shoes. On the left top, Xenopoulos in Latin letters, and then Italiano shoes instead of Italian shoes. So we have three languages, Greek, English, and Italian. Here we have on top right, final sale, the bigger characters, followed by Proton Timi sale. It means here, knowing that it's a shoe shop, it means that the first shoe is on sale, the first pair of shoe is on sale, the second pair, δεύτερον μισή τιμή, is half price, but the rest sale. This mixture of languages is strange, I would say. Then we have souvlaki, sheftalya, kebab, some in English, some in Greek. And we now move to, again, code switching, but it involves here three languages. Reloj Hulugan is in Tagalog, Filipino, then oroloya, watches in Greek and English. We see that it's not actual translation because there are words that are not translated into the three languages. Only the first one appears in Tagalog, which means actually we have watches sold. You can be bought through installments, okay? But this is not, it does not appear as a message in Greek or in English, and the reason is that this is not something that Greek, Cypriots, or English speakers would be interested. This is a characteristic, most probably, of the way some Filipinos can buy. So that's why it is in Tagalog. We also have other signs which can be in Arabic only, Turkish only, Italian only. And this is the percentage. These are the percentages. English only 36%, and Greek only 19% of the signs. And then we go to the ones with code switching, 14.6%. Other languages, 5%. And what are the conclusions? English is important as a global lingua franca. We have a very high visibility in various forms. It appears, it's visible as an autonomous language. It means it is alone on the sign, 44%. English only items, 36.3%, and English registered trademarks 8.48. But English is also there in mixed code signs, English with other languages, 14%, English with Greek translation, 6%, Greek English translation with English dominance, and Greek English translation with Greek dominance, Greek names transcribed into Latin letters but followed by English words. So it's there in many ways. Now, Greek has a rather low visibility, 19%, being the official language. In comparison to English, it has a low visibility, but it's present enough, you can see it. Turkish, it's visible enough. Turkish has very limited visibility, 5.3%. It reflects the de facto division of the island, the political aspects that are valid now, the fact that even if there is crossing now through the borders. The Turkish seem to be using more English. So it seems that that is why shops do not feel the need to present their products in Turkish too, and the shop signs in Turkish too. So we see that what prevails is a pragmatic perspective of the topic, of the issue, following the failure of the enactment of the laws. People use what they think will address better the citizens. They use whatever language they feel it is appropriate for the purpose. So is this chaos and disorder? Yes, for some people, but for some others, it is the reflection of the right, the expression of the right of freedom of speech and expression. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Carola Bricchi, for this very exciting and very stimulating presentation. And it's one of those cases where we will leave after the presentation and look again with increased attention our surroundings. I'm sure we will do so whether we're in Cyprus or in LA and its own multilingual environment. So thank you very much. At this point, I would like to ask you to join me in thanking the four presenters for their wonderful, wide-ranging, and very stimulating presentations. And we will move ahead to the Q&A. I remind you that you can post questions in the chats. I saw many comments coming in already and a few questions. So you can pose the questions and we'll read them to the presenters, or you can simply raise your virtual hand and I will give you the floor to ask your question directly. I thought though, since Dr. Hagidimitriou is not able to join us today, so that we could also hear some perspectives on the exciting material that she has presented for us, to ask from the other panelists and any experts in the audience if they had any thoughts or perspectives they would like to share on what Dr. Hagidimitriou has presented, whether on the contents themselves or whether they can think of points of similarity or difference from their own studies of the languages of Cyprus. So I invite the panelists first, I think by the order in which they presented. I don't know if Matthias, you would like to go first and offer some thoughts on what Christo has presented, and then we will hear from the rest before we pose questions for you.
Well, I think it is the Christo's talk was again a demonstration of the universality of the phenomena, as I wanted to point out the hierarchy, for instance, of copying, of borrowing, from lexical borrowing to structural borrowing. And she mentioned something I had not the time to do, which is very interesting actually, is the semantic loans. She had very interesting examples about so-called semantic loans, about calques. So for instance, I didn't recognize you to say I didn't understand you, which is a translation, let's say translation borrowing from Greek Cypriot. This is also a stage of copying, which is very important in the language contact scenario. So that's what I wanted to underline, the universality again of this phenomenon.
Thank you. Elena, did you have any thoughts you'd like to share or any responses?
Yeah, I agree with what Matthias mentioned, and also I think I found it very interesting how this bidialectalism of Greek we have Standard Greek and Cypriot Greek kind of find their way into these cases of language contact. So like when you have two languages crossing, in the case of Greek, it's not, you've got two varieties crossing, and of course Turkish as well. So yeah, we could see some examples in the Armenian case as well. So you don't have just two solid languages into contact, but you've got a case of bidialectalism, the dimorphia for the Greek. So you've got the J, you've got the G as well. So I thought that was very interesting as well, and it kind of came into dialogue with what I encountered as well. So yeah.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Dimitra? Dimitra, we cannot hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I would like to add something else. I was very sorry to hear that Melkonian, the most well-known school, Armenian school, closed down a few years ago, not because of the Cyprus government. The government did want it to continue, but the decision came from outside Cyprus. And I think this school, because I met young people who graduated this school, they came from abroad, they stayed in the boarding school and studied for 6 years, and then they decided to stay in Cyprus to move into university in Cyprus. That school was a source of safeguarding Armenian in Cyprus. It was a source of learning the language, not only for the Armenians in Cyprus, but for other people with Armenian ethnicity living outside Cyprus.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very important to reiterate and to know and to remember. We can now proceed to questions directly concerning the presentations that we heard. So I invite you to write any that you have in the chat or in the Q&A, or to raise your virtual hand. And while we are waiting for some questions to arise, I was wondering if I might ask you first, Matthias, and this is based on the insights that we learned from the lecture by Stavroula Tsiplago 2 weeks ago, and also by Spiros Armostis yesterday, that they were talking about this, the position that Cypriot Greek has today in relation to Standard Greek and this new prestige that is accorded to the dialect. And I was wondering, are there any similar phenomena or any similar developments in Turkish Cypriot in relation to Standard Turkish? What's the sociolinguistic status of Turkish Cypriot in relation to the Standard variety?
Well, actually, yesterday we heard that already from Maria Petru, who justly said that the prestige of Cypriot Turkish is surprisingly high. And this has to do, and this is very interesting, I think, with the dissociation process towards speakers of Standard Turkish and of other Turkic dialects. So, of course, there is koinization, there is a leveling, there is impact on from the standard language through media, especially, or people who study, go to Turkey and come back. The standardization effect is very high, like everywhere. But the dialect is surviving, and it has a relatively high status. This is very interesting, although Turkish Cypriots are a minority in the north.
Thank you very much.
Question.
Yes. The question in the chat? Oh, Dimitra, I didn't hear you. Well, you said you had a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question. based on yesterday's presentation by Dr. Petru and today's presentation by Dr. Kepler, is the Turkish Cypriot dialect now a subject-verb-object language, or we have subject-verb-object only in certain cases? Because standard Turkish is a subject-object-verb.
This is not easy to respond. Of course, Cypriot Turkish is a variety which is not standardized. So we have to differentiate between the different stages of social linguistic speech. Is it a basilect? Is it the acrolect? And so there are big differences between them. If we are talking about the basilect, I would say that which is mainly spoken by the elder generation now, I would say that is effectively a subject-object-verb language. We can state this, yes. But this is not the reality, because it's much more complex, of course. There is, it is very, how do you say, mobile, very flexible. The speech circumstances and the social contexts are so complex that the influence from standard Turkish makes it in certain circumstances also, again, let's say a subject-object-verb language. I think I said it in the wrong way before. I wanted to say that it is a SVO language. Yes, did I say that? Basilect is SVO, yes?
Oh, you said the reverse.
And
so
from the influence of standard, it's becoming again SOV. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, that's what I can say now. This is a complex,
Yeah.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat by Maria Petru, yesterday's speaker, to Elena, and the question says, do Pontic Greek speakers from Trabzon speak Trabzon Turkish, which displays Greek influence, especially in the phonological level? And if yes, is there Turkish influenced by Cypriot Turkish?
Wow, that's a very good question. The answer is I don't know, because I explored only their Greek. Many of the speakers didn't speak any Turkish when they arrived in Cyprus. So they spoke only Pontic Greek because they lived up in the mountains in Trabzon. So yeah, that would have been that is a great actually a topic for a new research. But I wouldn't know is the answer. I also posted a link because there was a question by Alosha, a comment asking for a paper, published paper, and I published something last year in languages. So I posted the link for the work that's been presented today for anyone who would like to read more about it.
Thank you, Ellen. And if I may ask also something else about what you presented, what's the situation with the preservation and endurance of this language? Are they transmitted to younger members? If they are not transmitted, are there any efforts, or can there be any efforts for them to be documented and preserved? What's that situation looking like?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first, because of time, I didn't actually show a lot of the context, but it was very difficult reaching out to them, very difficult. They were very suspicious, very close community. So it took a lot of time to kind of, and a lot of gate openers to manage to go into this community. It depends on the network of the social network of the family. So some some are like, the language, the language, I mean, there is a lot of shift. So, I mean, Turkish is dominant. They keep their Pontic Greek, the Rumja, for when they talk to the grandparents, when they talk to the parents. And also Cypriot Greek is gaining ground, which is very interesting. They also have very strong ties with Trabzon, so they go to Turkey a lot. They have their, they have many links and ties with. So it's not that they're enclave from their place of origin. However, even in Trabzon, this dialect is dying. So they carried it with them. They keep it, but there's no space for this dialect. So I think we're talking about language, definitely language shift. It's there in a symbolic way, but yeah, definitely no funding, not because of the situation. Also, it's kind of hidden on many levels. Yeah. I don't know if I answered the question.
Absolutely, thank you. And I see that Joanna has her hand up.
Yeah. But there's a question before me in the chat.
Sorry, I can.
Yes, the
address that.
question from Carola that's asking, and I believe this must be a question for Elena Ioannidou. Please correct me if I'm mistaken.
I think it must be for Dimitra.
That's for me.
Sorry.
Yes, there are other languages. Yes, there are other languages. I just didn't have time to present. Yes, we have Tamil, we have Urdu, especially when you see the languages displayed in in those offices for currency exchange. Then you see a lot of languages, Bengali, Urdu, Tamil, yes. But in total, they have a very low visibility.
Russian, however, perhaps more?
Russian was small, I was surprised, because the Russians do not go into the old city. They are on the coastal areas, and it's actually, I mean, in Protaras now, it used to be they were dominant in the Russians and their language in Limassol. They even have a radio station, and there are shops. You enter and you hear Russian, you hear the radio station of the Russians in Limassol. Recently, the Famagusta area, Protarasa, Yanapa also have included Russian almost everywhere, but not in the old city of Lefkosia. And we have Chinese in the, on the way to Paphos, billboards in Chinese, because a lot of Chinese buy land and houses in Paphos. Again, not in the old city.
Thank you. Joanna, do you want to pose your question?
Yeah, sure. That was for Elena again. I was wondering about the Romaica that the Turkish Cypriots are speaking, because now, I mean, since 74, obviously, most of them have moved to the north. How does that compare to the Greek Cypriot that we speak in, the free areas, but also in the occupied areas? Because, I interacted also with some people in Glovismenus in the north. And of course, their Cypriot Greek is a little bit older than, what we modernized or standardized the Cypriot Greek we speak in Paphos, in Limassol, Nicosia. So I don't know, how does that compare? Is that very different? Is it similar?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Actually, a paper is coming out on a collective volume we're doing on a book by Routledge on heritage languages, and I've got a chapter on this exactly. Well, yeah, they because it was enclave, they speak older form of Cypriot Greek, so they have basilectal forms, and it was very obvious from some of the data I showed today, because what the Pontic Greek took from the Turkish Cypriots were older forms of Cypriot Greek, and that's so interesting. For example, we don't say epostathika, that's older. I mean, we do say it, but usually in the urban koine, that's more like towns, like city Cypriot Greek, you would say kourastika, right? Postachika is basilectal. So yeah, they do speak older forms of Cypriot Greek. Also very interesting is that they retained their local isoglosses. So because some of them came from Paphos, some came from Tiliria, they kept the local subvarieties of Cypriot Greek. That is kind of lost for Greek Cypriots now. In terms of language values, before the opening of the border in 2003, they had very positive values for their Cypriot Greek in terms of knowledge. I mean, they were they had a stigma, a more political stigma, but on the whole, they were proud for speaking Cypriot Greek, Romaica. Now, when the border opened, there were a lot of complaints that your Greek, meaning our Greek, the Greek Cypriot Greek, changed. And it's not as what we knew. And so there was an added layer of stigma that they didn't speak Cypriot Greek as they knew it. So again, it's very complicated, but yeah, this is what they speak. And yeah.
Before the invasion, did they speak like the people from Paphos would speak like the same dialect as the Greek Cypriots would speak exactly the same?
Yes. Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly. But you need to just bear in mind that Gurbetcha had two types of Turkish Cypriots. The Turkish Cypriots who moved from Paphos and Tiliria, and they went to Yalousa. And the Turkish Cypriots who were always there, like those who were in Galinoporni, in Agios Andronikos, in Agios Simeos. So you've got two types of Romaica speakers. And there are a lot of comments, and like for example, people from Galinoporni would say, "Oh, those who came from Tilliri, they're Tilliri. How do they talk like that?" Talking about meaning they're Greek. So I guess I need two or three PhD students and a big research project to document the complexities. But it's a very fascinating area. Very fascinating area. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I had a question for Dimitra. Dimitra, you mentioned, I'm going to make use of the background knowledge that you provided us, that you are engaged in a study of similar topics in Malta, and Malta obviously has many parallels to Cyprus in its history. And I was wondering if you could give us like a snippet of whether you see parallel things in Malta, or whether the linguistic landscape there has taken a different course and there is a dominant language.
It is very interesting because the two islands share many common aspects. Okay, former British colonies, islands in the Mediterranean, they have a local dialect as well. The Maltese, the difference is that English is an official language, and the visibility of English in Malta is much higher than in Cyprus because of that. Yeah, as far as the rest is concerned, they are okay. There are a lot of similarities, but the great difference was the high visibility of English. Ours is 40%, and theirs was above 70.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so maybe at this point we can draw this event to a close by thanking again. Please join me in thanking our speakers for their wonderful presentation, and an ideal second part to the conference that began yesterday. I think we all learned things that we didn't know, and we've had a chance to reflect on things that we vaguely knew or we already had a good grasp of. They were very generous in sharing their scholarship and expertise, and they made this a very memorable encounter. I would also like to thank our partners in this event. And as Ioanna has mentioned, we had many partners and supporters, and I believe this is a testament to the value of studying and preserving multilingual and multicultural communities. And it was an special point of pride for us to place Cyprus in this kind of context, both off campus and in the UCLA campus. Lastly, I would like to thank everyone who attended yesterday and today for the lively and dynamic participation. And I would like to say that we hope that we welcome you to our future events. For those of you with Cyprus-specific interests, we have several upcoming online events, and I will put the link in the chat where you can find them. And I hope that we will be able to see you and chat with you again. I wish you a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you.